Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. It is a lovely, typically Dreich Tuesday here in Glasgow, Tuesday the 14th of August. My name is Billy McDiarmid. I'm the Head of Client Success at Candidate ID, and we're over the moon that you could join us for our next talent talk, where we'll be talking about resourcing insights. I'm joined by my peer and friend, Jeremy Thornton from Resourcing Insights. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us today. Do you want to introduce yourself, tell the group a little bit more about yourself and about your businesses before we kick off?
Brilliant. Well, thank you firstly for inviting me into this chat. So I'm Jeremy. I founded Oasis HR Group back in 2004, originally a rec to rec. Now part of the business is a HR recruitment. So we place HR professionals, including a lot of internal recruiters, into multiple sectors. We run our own think tank series. Off the back of the think tank, the members of that think tank basically recognized that they didn't have enough data, and they weren't using data in the way they potentially could. So because I had a network, they invited me to see if I could come up with some ideas, and that's where the whole seed for Resourcing Insight came from. So here today, I'm sort of double hatting, I guess, a bit. I've got Resourcing Insight, which is my window into the internal recruitment markets. I'm also fortunate that I've also got the window into the agency, because we obviously run one here. So just looking forward to hopefully having a fascinating conversation. And lots of good questions from the audience.
Fantastic. I've been particularly looking forward to super subbing for Adam today. My background, for those that don't know, has been mainly in agency and consulting. So my experience of in-house has been mainly in the consulting side. So I'm really interested in particular, and we'll talk about this a little bit later, about how can we get what advice has Jeremy got in particular about getting in-house teams, RPO teams, agency teams sharing data, working together to try and improve the experience both for all of those parties, but also externally candidates as well. But we'll get onto that in a little second. So Jeremy, just to start off with, we caught up earlier on today, and something that struck me was your message about keeping it simple. So when you're talking to in-house teams for the first time about how they're going to use data, what approach and what process do you take? How do you get started with them?
Okay, great question. The first thing that we do is we always talk to our customers about what is their reporting strategy. The same way that finance has a reporting strategy. Once a month, once a quarter, once a year, finance will bring out specific reports which cover specific areas of their business, and the format of those reports is accepted by the business. You don't suddenly turn around and say, I'd like a set of management accounts or cash flow from the 15th of April to the 31st of July. It's accepted. However, what we find generally within HR and talent acquisition recruitment is the business asks for a lot of ad hoc information. So quite often our customers are running around in a quite unorganized fashion. So the first thing we do is try and understand actually what do you want to use this data for. We find data tends to sit within two brackets. The first one is evidencing success, and the second one is how you influence your business. So if I take those one at a time, Billy, evidencing success, we realized a while back from an agency perspective that actually a lot of internal recruitment functions didn't really understand what an agency does, which sounds really silly because loads of recruiters come from an agency background. They didn't really understand the drivers. So we've worked really hard as a business to talk to our customers and explain how we work. That ultimately creates better relationship. I see a lot of the time within organizations, talent acquisition just assume the business know what they do. Yes, we hire people. Yes, the business get that as a top line, but actually they don't really understand the nuances and they don't understand the challenges. So it's actually, what does the business need to know and how can you evidence the success that you are having? And then what we do is talk about language a lot. So we find that a lot of talent acquisition folk, and this is a mistake that I've made myself in the past, You talk in a language that feels comfortable to you. However, quite often it's not really a language that the business understands or cares about. So I was with a customer the other day, for example. They're talking to the business how they've reduced their cost per hire. The business didn't really care. It's a multi-million pound professional service organisation. And what effect does it have on them if cost per hire drops from, say, 4,600 to 3,600? Doesn't really. We looked at their data and we put it into a different language for them, which was around, we can evidence that for every 1 day we reduce your time to hire across all of your vacancies, you will add 250,000 to your business's bottom line. Now, it's in a language that finance understand. We're talking about the bottom line, and also it's a significant sum that they get. So we try and make sure we're in the right language. I just saw Amy has popped up there on the side saying just start reporting on time to fill and cost of hire. Yeah, I would always say time to fill and cost per hire are a great, what we describe as sort of tactical piece of data, a great one for you to have as a team, a great one for you and the team to talk and discuss, especially when you start to compare that to different channels, i.e. what's our average cost if we're going through the referrals versus direct versus job site, so that the team can come more commercially aware and understand the effect they're having on your spending. So we basically, once we understand the language the business is talking in, we then start to break down the data and understand what data actually matters. I find, sorry, Billy.
So how do you then, so the data that actually matters, I'm quite interested in how you go in and find out actually for, you're talking about finance are obviously a key part of this. So, but looking at all the, if you look at the board level stakeholders, if you look at the line management stakeholders as well. So how do you work out what data sets are important to each stakeholder, both in terms of the verticals and the horizontals, and then measure actually whether it really is important to those stakeholders or not? Because quite often, and my previous experience has been, a stakeholder will think that something's important, but it takes us some time to actually figure out that they were wrong, and we need to find another route to do that.
What we do, just take that back one step, we always talk to customers about mapping their stakeholders. So we tend to map stakeholders on the traditional axis. One is how influential is that stakeholder? So is it a junior stakeholder or is it the CEO at extremes? We then on the other axis, we map their interest. So for example, you want the senior stakeholders to be interested in what you're doing. What you don't want is a junior stakeholder who is really interested in talent acquisition, asking your business all the time for loads of ad hoc data and reporting that you spend weeks and weeks running around. You produce them in a nice pack for them. You give it to them. By the time they've got that data, they're not even really sure why they asked for it originally, or it doesn't really impact any changes they have. So I'd always say you want to identify the stakeholder audience that you want to impact, so you're controlling it. Then what we would recommend anyone to do is you've got to get them interested. So just start to introduce some reporting. So if I put that into context, we work with Legal & General on their investment manager business. Their CEO has dictated that they want the business to get to 50-50 gender split by 2020. Now they were struggling to do this. What we've done in our reporting is we provide each of their divisional CEOs a really nice, well put together A4 report. It's only got 4 measures on it. It's got the number of hires they're making. It's got the level of those hires and the gender of them. It's got the percentage of female hires they're making pulled out. And then it's also got source per hire. So we've introduced that to those senior stakeholders just to start them talking. Now, what's happened off that is some stakeholders have become interested and they're coming back asking for more information. Others aren't doing so, which is fine. But what it's done is now that all of the stakeholders can see, the divisional CEOs can see how their divisions are personally contributing to the group reaching its goal. It's brought that whole piece out in the open, and it's starting the conversation. So
and Animal's just come in with a point there. That's Animal's taking us off slightly there, but gender, obviously gender's a hot topic across recruitment and the broader HR section. So how he's raised probably a slightly trolling point, as we know Animal does, but in terms of making sure you're ticking all the boxes on that kind of controversial thing, how much, we're going off slightly at a tangent, but how much research are you doing before you start to introduce these metrics? Is it based on previous experience with existing clients, or are you looking externally to figure out what you should be including within those data sets?
So great question. What we do is we tend to workshop this with customers. So into that workshop, we would bring the head of talent acquisition, we bring their diversity counterpart, we bring their finance counterpart, we bring sometimes a stakeholder in from the business, we bring someone in from their technology department. So the idea is that we've got all of the contributors and the audience around the table. Then we can start to have that conversation. So actually what we find is a lot of organizations have some fantastic aspirations, but they don't actually have the physical means to, for example, measure all the different specific gender sets. So we say, right, we're doing a starting point. So Mr. Business, this is where we want to get to over the next 12, 24 months or so, but we are very much on a journey. And we are introducing in this reporting to start that journey. And over the next few months, we're going to be improving how we collect data. Then what we do is when we get data from all of our customers, we validate that data. We go through it line by line by line. And we'll pick out, for example, empty fields or something that's unclear. And we'll ask the actual individual recruiter to verify that. Once the recruiters on the front line realise that all of their data is being looked at and verified, and if it's not right, we will come back to them. They start to pay more attention into producing the better data. So for the first 3 months, it's quite a lot of work. Next 3 months, it gets a little bit easier. 6, 12 months in, it runs really smoothly. So we build up the data sets, we build up the complexity of the data over a period of time, rather than trying to go in, because if you're trying to report on a data set that is less than 0.5% of a population, as you can imagine, on a no matter how you visualize that, it can be quite tricky to make sure that nothing is not communicated in the right way.
Yeah. The other thing is, I suppose, with the type of reporting as well within recruitment, and this is all of a struggle in that the data sets are relatively small in a number of cases, and actually we're doing some work just now with the University of Strathclyde on this, who have got a really good computer science department. To look at, okay, how do you, so if we gather, like, let's say for talking's sake, we've got an audience. So we've got an audience of data scientists, and we say we've got an audience of 1,000 data scientists, and we're trying to gather insight on their behaviour through the entire recruitment cycle. Everything from how we're attracting them through to how we're converting them. But then how do you then try and expand that data set? And how do you bring in other data sources, whether that's consumer data sources, business-to-business data sources, anything like that, in order to almost just bring the sample up to a size where actually you potentially avoid the issues that come with smaller data sets. We know the issues with smaller data sets, and that sometimes they'll be completely thrown off by just simply one abnormal results in it. So how do you, if we take something like that, like the process with legal in general that you're talking about, how do you eradicate the possibility of one or two false results altering the perspective and the pivot of the results?
We'll decide with the customer what protocols we're going to follow. So, for example, what you're describing there, we might remove those outliers. There might be a specific reason why, for example, one role has been open for over 300 days. And actually, if we put that open time against all of the vacancies, then it's going to throw everything. So actually, we'll have a conversation about outliers. The big thing that we have that I've seen across a lot of sectors, and we go in and we look at companies, ATSs, everything from your small providers right up to your Workdays, your Teleos, all the rest of it. Generally, when we go in and we start looking at that data, we find a couple of things. One is quite often they're trying to collect too much data. That would be nice to have. The second is they're forgetting who the audience are. They are putting data together that makes sense to analytical community. It makes sense to a data scientist, but it's not in a format that a stakeholder will understand. Now, the analogy that I use across talent acquisition is basically that a stakeholder reads a report in the same amount of time as a recruiter reads a CV. Literally 1 or 2 seconds sometimes.
Okay.
Lots of stakeholders won't even turn the page. So you need to get the information to them in a really, really simple format. You're reporting. You're giving them a report at a certain level. This is not a drill down, deep analytical tool. Start the conversation at the very top level. And then once you have that, then you can start to drill down. Then you can start to become more intelligent with the data. But if you try and go from a standing start to predictive analytics overnight, it's never going to happen. It's just take it in small steps and make it digestible.
Just to address a point that Jacob's mentioned there, yes, we are, Jacob, we are talking just purely about factual data here. My point was just about if you had a small data set, were there other ways that you could, perhaps eventually expand that data set for other reasons? So that was a different, slightly off tangent point that I was making about that.
That's a really good point, Jacob. One thing we always do with data is we drill down into the understanding. So we make sure it's factual. So, for example, we can factually record the working days that a seat is empty, for example. If we start talking to a customer and they want to record the efficiency of their HR business partners, well, a good HR business partner in one division might be a really poor HR business partner in another division. So we make sure that we're using factual data all of the time, and then also what we do is we do a lot of work around definition. So if you go into a lot of organizations and talk about time, you'll find you might get very different answers. We work with one large organization. Their HR function worked in payroll periods. Okay. Talent acquisition worked in working days. So straight away you've got two totally different measures, all just being referred to as time. You go into a lot of organizations and you ask 3 people to define what is a permanent hire, you get a different answer. So I think data is something that the perception is that reporting is nice and easy, but actually you've really got to dig down into the detail.
On that note, how far along are you in the process with legal in general at the moment?
So Legal Gen, we've been running with them for over a year now. We do all of their reporting across their investment management division. We supply their head of talent acquisition with a management report. So that basically gives him an overview of all of his key metrics. We provide the divisional CEOs with a report that just focuses purely on their division. So they just see their data. We also provide the individual recruiters with reports, so that we're asking recruiters to supply data. We're then verifying that data, but quite often the recruiter doesn't get value from the data. So all the data they've collected on the coalface, goes up to some, really high up stakeholder report that they never actually see. So what we do is we give their recruiters an individual report that drills down and shows them how they're performing against the rest of the team. They can see in black and white how everyone's performing. One example is gender by source. So what level of candidates are they, female candidates are they getting per source? That then enables the teams to sit together and realize, actually, some of the team members are having real success on that channel, others aren't. Let's have a conversation. And then we also do cost reporting. So we'll drill down and we can show them their return on investment from their LinkedIn spend, their job board spend, their key costs.
Are those what you're reporting on, what you're measuring on, are those fairly typical criteria across your clients, or do you find that there's a significant difference between what Legal in General, what you eventually report on Legal in General, on versus other blue chip, other enterprise level clients?
Yeah, I mean, if what we report on Legal in General, we compare that to what we report on, for example, at Body Shop, it's very, very different because obviously very, very different businesses. The dashboards, the individual dashboards in each of those reports are produced in a language that is right for that business, using their terminology. Classic. Is it a resourcing? Is it recruitment? Or is it talent acquisition? As an example. And depending upon what the drivers in the business are, so Legal in General, they're very, very driven on gender right now. Body Shop, opposite. In a lot of areas of their business, they have a very, very high female percentage, much, much smaller male percentage. So it depends on what the customer needs. So at the outset, we tend to try and define what the outcomes, and then we work in a logical order back. One thing I would add to that is the whole, when you're buying technology. So if you're buying an applicant tracking system, if you're buying a talent pipeline generation tool, like that Candidate ID one, for example, what we say to customers is actually spec that out. What do you want the outcome to be? What measures do you need from that piece of technology? Then we can work out which bits of data need to be collected at exactly which process, exactly each part of the process, so that ATS or HRS implementation team has an exact specification of what they need. That way, when you implement, you know what the outcome's going to be, rather than what we see a lot of organizations do is they buy the shiny one, they get excited about putting a new system in place. It becomes a bit of a pet project. It's not properly defined, and they then try and reverse engineer the business around the system, and they then try and reverse engineer the report out.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with that, and I learned a long time ago during an ADAPT requirements gathering and implementation that you should never ever buy a CRM or ATS based on its reporting capabilities. For me, in particular, when you're talking about a reporting tool and a reporting platform, you should, if you're serious about reporting, then you need to look at a solution that's certainly can take the data from your CRM or ATS, but is a standalone solution with power behind it, because otherwise you there's never been a CRM or ATS that I have seen that has got the reporting options that work. The best ones for me are the ones where I can take the data out in Excel or take it out in CSV format, or plug in the API, or do something like that, and then mess about with that data within a reporting platform. I don't want to mess about with the data in the CRM or the ATS or the MA tool itself. It ends up too complicated. That's what we do as a platform. Everything can be pushed out in CSV or over the API. CRMs that I've worked with, people like HireServe, people like Firefish, these guys, they all do a really similar thing. It's by far the best way of actually doing it.
One thing I'd say there is, if you are new to reporting, or if you feel that you need to upskill the level of reporting across your business. When you're looking and talking about these systems, yes, you can API everything together, and API is fantastic because it gives you up-to-date, day-by-day data. What we always say to a customer is, if you have a dashboard, let's just say we've got a dashboard, and the dashboard is, to use a stereotypical talent acquisition measure, is your time to hire. At the end of the month, if that dashboard flicks up, so time to hire has increased, it's gone from 34 days to 42 days. Do you know specifically what action you are going to take? And also, how long will it take that action to impact your business? So to begin with, we see a lot of clients wanting instant live reporting, but then actually once they realize the period of time it changes to change internal processes, behaviors, cultures, or what resource, whatever it might be, actually they're chasing their tails and they've set unrealistic expectation. I don't know, I've yet to find an HR function that really needs anything more than monthly reporting, purely because of the time that it takes to change. There are some nuances, if for example that HR function is also reporting on ER issues or payroll or that, then yes, obviously it needs to be more often. But your day-to-day stuff, because normally if there's a change to be made, a conversation needs to be had internally, you're waiting for decisions to be made, and then you're waiting for that information to flow back down to the function. So we just say, let's be realistic, start simple in nice bite-sized jumps.
Yeah, it's what we advocate that too, and to give a specific example, so Specsavers in Northern Europe in particular, they get down to real granular detail on their candidate activity. So in terms of the journey from when the candidate enters the journey to when the candidate converts or doesn't convert on a monthly basis, what they go down to is literally a line item for each candidate around, okay, what pages on the career site have they visited, what was the time on the page, what was then their movement, what page did they go to from that. Now that's a brilliant report month to month, because you're picking up an entire set of candidate data over that period of time. The candidate could visit the client's website 3 or 4 times over that month and do different things. But in isolation, you're right, on a dashboard, on a short period of time, if you only report on that for 1 day or 2 days, there isn't enough of a delta to actually justify it, and you end up in a situation where sometimes people, and we've had it with that client, where they've looked at something, went, oh, maybe there's a problem with that, but actually when you went a little bit deeper and compared it to previous periods, etc., there was no problem. It kind of created a false flag situation. So I've just realised behind me that sign's about to fall down. I knew that was going to happen today. I just fixed it earlier on, and so we're in that perfect situation where that's going to fall down behind me. So yeah, I couldn't agree more. But it's about. I had this situation when I worked in agency land, where the pressure of ad hoc reporting on the reporting function, which for a large period of time was me, that meant that I was literally spending probably about 40% of my overall time generating ad hoc reports instead of standardizing it, and I quickly recognized that the time pressure that I had. But you do need to have stakeholder buy-in, particularly from that C level, in order to get the timeliness of the reports correct. Jeremy, I wanted to kind of move on from I suppose that level of detail around the how and the what, and maybe talk about the cultural impact, particularly when it comes to around how success is treated, but more importantly, actually, I think how failure is treated from a recruitment perspective, and how you work with clients to make sure that success is recognised and you take the lessons of success through, but how actually when stuff goes tits up, when stuff goes goes wrong in the reports, when there's a problem that's been identified, how you work with your clients to make sure they build the lessons that the data is telling you into that.
Yeah, I think this comes down to the front end piece. First of all, actually, if we're going to go down this whole route of putting reporting into a business, what do we need it for? Because it's great to report on loads of stuff. People like adding complexity. I would suggest that if you are reporting, you keep the same format of reports for a long period of time, i.e. quarterly, rather than trying to add new stuff every single month. Yes, you might find it interesting. Yes, it might be really high on your agenda, but your CEO, he just wants to know the absolute bare facts that are relevant to him for the decisions that he needs to make. I think it's also just saying to a organisation, we're on a journey. So we're good at some stuff, we're brilliant at some stuff, but some stuff we're actually poor at, and we can recognise the fact that we are poor at that over the next XYZ period of time. It might be 6 months if you've got a big team, big push, big project. It might be over the next 2 years or even 5 years. This is the journey that we want to go on. So over the 5 years, we want to go from being lower quartile. We want to move ourselves into average, upper quartile, with a view that we want to be best in class in these areas. Then what we always try and do is relate that back. So if we're going to shift our time to hire from 65 days down to 32 days, what is the impact of that? What is the actual financial impact? You work out the financial impact of filling those roles, each role is in half the time over that period of time. That comes to quite a significant number. Once you understand what that number is, you can then go back to the business and start to talk to them about the return on investment, and also about the resource you're going to need, i.e. I want to put in extra 3 headcount, but the impact of that headcount over this period of time is going to be that number on the financial bottom line, rather than going, I'm going to cut costs all the time. So I think if you want to build it, you need to build it. You need to build the complete business case and know how your data is part of that business case, rather than just sharing data for the sake of sharing data, which unfortunately lots of functions do, and then lots of functions sort of they're confused that the business isn't suddenly really interested in the data they're giving them, and they're not getting on the feedback back.
The transparency of the reporting side can be a little bit intimidating for departments and for businesses that perhaps haven't had a light shone in them that way. Have you got any examples of a time where maybe a team or a business has been uncomfortable about what has been uncovered as part of it, and how was that handled?
So we went into a professional service organisation who had some significant investment from a capital backer. We're talking multi-millions of pounds. Basically, the VC wanted to increase the profit of the organisation, so they stripped out a lot of the HR team, they stripped out a lot of the talent acquisition team, and their complete analytics team. The net result was, I think, about £2.4 million savings. So the business is going, this is really good news, we've saved all this money. We were then able to work out, based upon lost revenue, i.e. for every single day that a role is open, what is the average revenue that head brings in across the business. We were able to times that up. We were actually able to show that the new approach was actually costing them probably circa 16 to 18 million pounds per year in the negative. Now, right, okay. we shared that with our stakeholder. That and some other interesting facts. The stakeholder then decided to share some of them with the business and decided not to share others with the business. But it's knowing, I think, how to use the data and how to challenge the data. And quite often the overarching feedback we find is we just never thought about looking at it in this way. So it's just to change things. But yes, we I personally believe there are a lot of HR directors out there, and there are a lot of heads of talent acquisition out there who do not want data. They do not want accurate reporting. They do not want anyone really having insight into their part of the business. They just want a quiet life. They want to carry on doing it as they've always done it. Their view of success is happy stakeholders. So happy stakeholder being they're happy with their performance, not saying to the stakeholder, actually, we're at this point and we want to move to this point. So I think, yeah, there are a lot of individuals out there, unfortunately, who push back against data because I think they're worried it might sort of shine light under the bushel, so to speak.
One of the biggest challenges for me in the past has always been, the natural tendency is to focus and as Jacob's just said, actually hit people on the head with the data and use it as a stick, as opposed to actually looking at the patterns and looking at it and using it to improve how someone performs, instead of it being used as a performance management tool. Actually, it's about, I really like what you said actually a couple of minutes ago about actually focus on the objectives, whether it's at a micro or a macro level, focus on what's trying to achieve it and how you get there, as opposed to using it as a as a tool for binding people. Certainly in my experience, binding people to their desks, making that old-fashioned agency method of people having to hit X many business development calls a week, or else they're performance managed and that kind of situation. And even I had a conversation with a peer this morning, someone who is working in an agency, not one of our clients, but someone who works for an agency who I've never had any experience with in the past, and they're still using analytics and data as a to turn the business into a KPI shop, or keep it into a KPI shop, as opposed to doing what you're talking about. And I really feel that the approach that you're talking about can be applied to not only in-house teams, but also to agency teams as well. How could your experience, because you're working both in recruitment and in with in-house teams, sorry, you're working both in agency and in-house teams, and you've got a lot of experience with RPOs as well. How can data, how have you used data in order to kind of bridge the gap between in-house and agency, or in-house and RPO, or all three actually for that matter? How can that help? Because we've all got experience with all three. We all know how fragmented that relationship can be, but I think there's a real argument that data can be used to get people through the difficulties in that relationship.
Yeah, great point. I mean, one of the things I'm really, really keen and really, really passionate about as an individual is to stop this them and us. It's, the internals don't like the agencies don't like the internals. Well, guess what, guys? We all do the same job. And actually, if you all work together and you understand the challenges that each other has, and you understand where the services fit, then fantastic. So what we found is it's basically about just sharing data and being very open, very visual. So when we're, from an agency perspective here, when we're working with a customer, we will give them data around, this is the number of candidates we've spoken to, this is the geographies they're in, the companies that they work for, this is what they thought about the process, all the way through. So we're giving them as much information as possible to evidence that we're working bloody hard. Quite often they just see, the swan swimming down the river and they can't see the legs underneath it. The other thing that we use data for is internally here, so that we can give our guys information so they can help themselves. Rather than saying you've got to do this, it's you're performing in this manner. These are the key data points from your performance, i.e. you sent this amount of CVs, you've had this amount of interviews, you've done this amount of placements. You go analyze it. You're smart individuals, and most individuals will know whether they're working hard or not, and only they will know that. So actually, when they look at that data, they can see that for themselves, and it's that truthful, honest conversation.
Okay, great. And how then, taking that kind of that step further, when you're presenting the information, How do you go over the reaction again? Going back to that reaction that can take place to the good data and the bad data, because again, it's going to shine a light on behaviours. It's going to shine a light on both the positive aspects and the negative aspects of that. How you probably are acting as the I suppose the counsellor and that relationship by using the data. So how do you make sure that actually, do you know what, it is used for the right purposes instead of the risk actually could be that it could make the relationship a bit more fractious and a bit worse?
My view is it's always easy to beat someone up, right? You can invite an individual into an interview and virtually make them cry. It's not that hard to do. As we see happen on the good old Apprentice with old Alan Sugar every single year. You can beat someone up. Same with data. You can take negative data or you can take positive data. You've got certain individuals who just like negative data. You've got certain individuals who are actually a lot more positive and like positive data. What we always say is positive data. People talk about things they like. So give them positive data and then wrap up any learning points using the data that you might not be viewing as positive. I think it also comes back to this whole drivers piece. So in a lot of agencies where they're very, very KPI driven, the reason that a recruiter is cold calling so many people, sending so many speculative CVs, trying to submit so many candidates, etc., the reason they're doing that is not to make a placement. The reason they are doing that is to keep their job. They look upon their primary activity as, I have to do these activities to keep my job, and hopefully I'll make a placement along the way. And that is the way that I think data is being used totally incorrectly by a lot of organisations. Yes, they should know how many CVs you need to send to a customer on average to get a job. Yes, they should know, if you are using cold calling, roughly how many cold calls you need to make to win it, to pull a job. But if you're going to beat people over the head with data and you're going to put people into an environment where all they care about is, in essence, keeping their job, then you're going to drive exactly the wrong behaviours. And we see it. It's been around in our industry. It's in every industry. I think every single industry, every single sector has advantages of it. And I think that the difference now is we're living in a much more transparent society where individuals can communicate with each other as their peers, internally and externally. And the millennials, for example, just to use a group as an example, they basically can figure out very quickly if they're working in the right company or not.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point to just start to wrap things up, and something that I've seen both when working in agency, but also consulting with in-house teams. You need to use analytics as signposts on the journey to the objective, as opposed to it being the hard stops along the way. It's about measure. For me, it's all about experimentation. Actually, with KPIs, it's what will work for one really successful team or one really successful business is completely different from what will work for another. And even at an individual level, you'll work with two individuals within the same team who will be high performing people, but their figures will look completely different. So it's really that what Jacob's just said there, that insight and that understanding of the figures is crucial to success for each individual person, for each individual team, and each individual business. I'm a firm believer that moving away from using KPIs to performance manage and use them just as guidance. That's the right agencies and the right in-house teams that are doing it that way are seeing far better results. Great. I'll let people just give people a minute to ask any other further questions that they might have. Jeremy, what can they do if people are interested in having a conversation with you further about this? What's the best way of getting in touch and the best way of doing that?
Jeremy Thornton on LinkedIn or jeremy.thornton@resourcinginsight.com. Have a look on the Resourcing Insight website. All the contact details are there. very happy to have a conversation to anyone, either how we can help, or if you already have your own reporting, maybe we could give you guys some little nuggets of information. More than happy to share. And yeah, once again, Billy, thanks for inviting me on this afternoon. It's been a fascinating conversation, and it's really good how we're seeing the market starting to evolve and begin to understand how data can be used. And I just love the little success stories where using data you can take someone from being a weak performer up to a top performer, and seeing them enjoy their job a lot more because they're performing in it.
Couldn't agree more. Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you everyone for joining us today. It is available to watch again on the same link. So please do, as Audra said, I think there was quite a lot in that. So quite a lot of real good detail and a lot of good lessons to learn. So please do watch it back. Any feedback that you have, please get in touch with either Jeremy or myself. But enjoy the rest of your day. Jeremy, thanks a million for joining us, and speak to you all very soon.
Brilliant. Thanks, guys. Take care. Bye-bye.
Cheers, guys. Bye-bye.